In this video, I am going to show how I make gluten-free corn flour flatbreads. We will learn how to make a dough from a gluten-free flour without any binders and making these delicious flatbreads with just corn flour, water and optionally some salt. I'm Shrikant Singh and welcome to our channel Happy Bellyfish. Making any flatbread needs three things that needs to be done right. Making the perfect dough that's neither too wet nor too dry, a good pan that can heat uniformly, and the skills to roll the dough, which probably is the toughest part. We call this flatbread as roti in India, but I'm going to call them tortillas for one basic reason, because I'm going to use them to make tacos, which I'll be showing in the next video. I'll also not be using a tortilla press but a rolling pin instead, because if you get the technique right, you can use it on doughs from other gluten-free flours. Now let's get to the recipe where we will learn how to make these flatbreads at home from scratch. I'm taking 2 cups of this corn flour. This is a completely gluten-free flour, and rolling gluten-free flour requires slightly different approach compared to rolling traditional gluten-containing dough. To make the dough from this corn flour, we need to boil 2 cups of water, and the ratio of flour to water is the same in the method that I'm showing. Add half a teaspoon of salt, and it is completely optional. It just makes the tortillas taste better and there's no other secret behind it. As soon as the water has come to a boil, turn off the flame and add this flour into the pot and mix it uniformly with the help of a spatula. Continue to mix until the flour and the water become one and the flour is evenly hydrated to form a dough. The mixing must be done so well that there are no lumps formed. But your job is not done yet. You need to cover the pot with a lid, and this will preserve the moisture in the dough. This dough must be kneaded with bare hands when it is easier to handle it. Right now it's too hot and it will burn your hand straight away. So we will allow it to rest for some time. In the next follow-up video to this, I'll be showing how to make tacos and some delicious fillings and sauces. So remember to subscribe so that you do not miss out. And if you find this video helpful, please show us your support with that like button. Now let's get back to the dough that was waiting in peace for around 10 minutes. The dough is comfortably warm now to handle, so we can use our bare hands to knead it. One important thing to know here is that the dough must not cool down completely to room temperature. It must still stay a bit warm. Knead this dough for around 5 to 7 minutes, and this helps to break down and activate the starches in the flour, and it improves the texture and binding of the dough. You will know when to stop when you take a piece of dough and are able to flatten it with your fingers without it falling apart, and when you don't see large cracks on the edges. Small cracks around the edges are expected. Now, while kneading it, if you feel that the dough is sticky, then you will have to add some flour and then knead it some more. And if it's too dry, then wet your hands and knead the dough. At the end of all this mechanical work, you will end up with a large, smooth ball of dough. Cover the bowl with a cloth or a lid and set it aside for around 15 minutes. Some people skip this part of waiting, but it actually gives you a softer tortilla. So the time-consuming part here is waiting, after which we will start to flatten the dough and roll them into round tortillas. And there are many ways to do it. You can hand roll it, but it needs quite some good skills. You can use tortilla press to make your job easier, or you can do it with a rolling pin, which I think is the most familiar way to many of us. Take a small batch of dough now and roll it on a flat surface into a log. And to get similar sized tortillas, cut this dough into equal sized portions. And this will also give you an estimate on how large the tortillas are going to be in the end. We also do not want to make very large tortillas that we cannot handle. They might break during the cooking process or when we are trying to handle it. Roll these pieces into round balls either with your hand or by rubbing it on a flat surface while maintaining a slight amount of pressure. Put all this into a bowl with flour and take one dough ball at a time. Dust the dough with flour evenly and roll it between your palms. I have found that doing this makes flattening the dough much more easier. It cracks less on the edges, and it works especially well with the dough that is made from gluten-free flours. Flatten it with your fingers as you place it on a flat board, and use a rolling pin with slight amount of pressure. As you roll, you may have to sprinkle some dry flour on the top. I also flip it or lift it once in a while to ensure that it is not sticking to the board. The tortillas must not be too thick, otherwise they will not cook evenly, and if they are rolled too thin, they will break easily when you're trying to transfer it to the pan. To make this process less frustrating, ensure that the surface that comes in contact with the dough are completely dry and free from any dough that might be sticking to it from your previous attempts. So cleaning the rolling pin and the flat surface is quite essential. We will first roll a batch of 3 or 4 balls of dough before we start cooking. And this makes the job much more easier, especially if you're a beginner. As you roll these tortillas, place them on a dry surface. You can sprinkle some flour on the top so that they do not stick to each other while they're waiting to be cooked. My favorite utensil to cook tortillas or roti is either a cast iron pan or a carbon steel pan, as they heat more evenly. Keep the heat on medium high. It must not be too much or too low, otherwise the tortillas that will come out will either be burnt or they will be too dry. Allow it to cook on the first side for around 30 seconds and then flip it over. And cook the other side for 30 more seconds. You will also notice that the tortillas puffs a little, so this is when you flip it once more and press it gently with a spatula. Move it around a bit and the tortillas will balloon on the pan. As you continue to cook, you will notice that some dry flour starts to accumulate on the pan, and you need to clean this with a kitchen cloth from time to time. The smell of burnt flour is not pleasant, and it also makes the tortillas cook in an uneven way. To puff the same tortillas on fire, use a pair of tongs, keep the flame on high, and place it on the fire directly. You will see the tortillas begin to balloon. It happens fairly quickly, and the idea is not to burn it or char it, but just to get this satisfying puff. When these tortillas are cooked, you must not put them in a closed container immediately. The tortillas will then turn soft and soggy. Finally, roll them in a cloth or serviette so that it doesn't dry out and remains fresh. Now, these tortillas can be enjoyed with almost anything, but when we think of tacos, we think of tortillas first. Now the burning question, what is the difference between corn flour and masa harina? So the tortilla that we all know of is made from masa harina, and this isn't an easy ingredient to find everywhere in the world. At least in India, corn flour is sold as masa harina, but it actually isn't. They're both made from the corn kernels, but the process to get the flour is quite different. The masa harina that you get in the supermarkets is actually prepared dough that has been dehydrated and then ground again into a flour. Masa harina also undergoes a process called nixtamalization to remove the outer pericarp by cooking the kernel in slaked lime water or calcium hydroxide. And this process also changes the corn's nutritional properties, like it increases the calcium content in it, it enhances the absorption of niacin, and it also improves its digestibility. The flour that I'm using is corn flour or maize flour, and this is nothing but field corn which is simply ground into a fine flour. It does not undergo any other processing, and it isn't cornstarch, and it certainly isn't masa harina, which is what the original tortillas are made from. So working with gluten-free flour is not as difficult as it may seem at first. You just need some practice, some patience, and the key here is to get the dough right. Once you get the dough right, everything is a breeze. I hope you have enjoyed this video and that you'll be making some gluten-free tortillas at home, because the next video that's going to come out, I'm going to show how you can make tacos, and tortillas is very much needed in that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon in the next video.